How would you characterize the nature of the cyber threat posed by Russia?
I think it's changing, and it's not new, of course. Russia has always been involved in cyber activity on networks way back to the 1990s and maybe slightly before. What has changed is their intent and their willingness to do aggressive things. So they've always been gathering intelligence and getting themselves positioned on networks. What we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years in a whole range of countries is a willingness to do destructive and often reckless things, from switching off domestic power in the Ukraine to switching off a French television station, through to interfering in elections in Germany and France and of course the United States and elsewhere. So what's particularly striking in those is they don't seem to mind being called out or having it attributed to them now. So that is a big change. The real question is over intent. So what do they actually want to do, and what risks are they prepared to take? What has changed is a growing evidence that they want to use those accesses to do destructive things rather than just sit and watch and gather. And that's a real problem for the West. We have a very open economy. All our countries have open economies. We are all networked. We have therefore more surfaces to attack than Russia, for example.
What you're talking about here is an attitude that says, catch us, we don't care. Now, how new is that, and what does it mean?
I think it is relatively new. It's from the last few years, and it reflects a growing sense, clearly in Moscow, that their stake in this is reducing. They don't care anymore, that they have been badly treated by the West in some way, and they no longer worry about being called out. I thought it was interesting, after all the controversy over the US election, in those interviews with Putin, almost publicly he was laughing a bit about this and not wanting to deny it. That's a huge change, and it reflects politics, not cyber. It reflects the fact that he doesn't feel there's any stake in the relationship at the moment.
To go to the American election, do we understand what Putin's strategy was? What did he set out to achieve?
This is inevitably opinion and assessment rather than fact, because nobody really knows, maybe even Putin himself. I think the objective was not a grand strategy to get a particular person elected. I think the objective was pretty much what the Russian intelligence services have always tried to do, which is to disrupt Western democratic institutions, to sow distrust in the public, and to undermine confidence in democracy. That's essentially what they've been doing right through the Cold War and have carried on doing, unfortunately. I don't think it was much more than that to start with.
But when you say to start with, does that mean that it evolved, that the mission, if you like, evolved?
Well, I think it evolved in the sense that it's unremarkable that the Russians should have been collecting information on political parties in the United States. They always have, and cyber is a new way to do it, but it's not unusual. What is different is they made a decision to weaponize this information, if you like. So they found information that was interesting and thought, what can we do with this to sow further distrust and disruption, and to do it aggressively. So that's a big change.
Jim Clapper said that it actually made him feel viscerally ill to see what the Russians did this time. How would you characterize the use of the material on this occasion?
Well, if you step back and you see similar things done in the French elections and the German elections and others as well, I don't think it's all that remarkable that they are doing this, so releasing information that might embarrass or one side or another, in order to sow general chaos and distrust. What makes cyber difference is you can do that on a big scale, quickly and easily and cheaply. So that's the difference in the digital era. It's not a new technique and it's not a new objective.
And what's your view of the role of Wikileaks in this? Because they have denied that Russia was the source of the material.
I have no special information on this, but I think it's very hard to see where else it could have come from, and WikiLeaks' objectives are so closely aligned with Russia's, and they very rarely do anything that isn't about attacking or destabilizing the US or the West in general, that it's quite hard to find any other explanation.
When did WikiLeaks become so aligned with Russia? It's one thing being opposed to the US because of a fight that they may be having with Hillary Clinton or whoever else, but aligning with Russia is a different thing. When do we think that happened? I
don't know. I think there's a great debate, which I'm sure you've seen in the media, about whether WikiLeaks is just a kind of useful idiot, as we would have said in the Cold War, being used by Russian agencies, or whether there is a more direct link. Who knows? In a way, it doesn't matter. I would imagine from a Russian intelligence point of view, it's a great distribution network, so why not use it? It's a lot easier than doing your own. So as long as the objectives are aligned, well, what's not to like, really?
So there were two things going on here. Obviously, there was once the material was stolen, there was the dumping of it by WikiLeaks, but then there was also the manipulation of it through social media. Now, how different was that in terms of what you'd seen before?
I think, as a sort of outside observer, it's entirely predictable with hindsight, though obviously the social media companies have said they didn't see it coming, that hostile intelligence agencies would use this fantastic world of social media to further their objectives. I mean, it's common sense, really.
But do the social media companies have an obligation to protect citizens from that kind of manipulation?
Well, with hindsight, everybody, frankly, should have been looking at this more closely and realizing that this might happen and that the intent had become more aggressive. I think that's the difference. And so the social media companies, because they have a very strong position that they're just platforms, they're not publishers, they don't have the same constraints that you or other journalists would have, that they're somehow not under an obligation to worry about how their platforms are being used. I think that's changing. Everybody now accepts they do have some responsibility. Exactly how that responsibility works, how it's regulated and overseen, is still being worked out.
What is your concern about where this goes next?
I think it's a very interesting moment because Putin's got through his election, and it'll be interesting to see whether he chooses to keep ratcheting this up or to go for a level of sort of plateau, or indeed to wind it down a little bit. The UK is not his primary target, frankly. So it will be very interesting to watch. It will be driven, as always, by internal domestic politics in Russia, I think, and what he needs to offset economic decline there. But he has in the past responded to strength and to strong signals. And I hope that Russia will take the signal from all these countries as a sign that patience has run out and that they should at the very least not ratchet it up further. It is worth remembering that viewed from Moscow, there is a strong sense of paranoia and victimhood since the end of the Cold War. Not always helped by the West, frankly, we've got things wrong. And I think they do see this as all part of a grand Western conspiracy against them, stretching from Australia to the United States and Europe in between. And it's hard to dislodge that. So they actually believe this. And everything from the Olympics doping scandal through to sanctions are a grand conspiracy. So that will be hard to shift. It will take a long time. As long as Putin can't address the Russian economic problems, and ironically, it will be harder because he won't get external investment as easily. People won't want to do business in Russia. It's too difficult, too dangerous, too corrupt. That means he's probably going to be tempted to wrap himself in the flag of nationalism even more firmly and to do more foreign adventures. I hope not, but I fear that might be the case.